Okay, Sophie and David. So we've got 4 lectures to talk about today, and it's kind of all over the. I mean, it's mostly, if you notice in the lecture series, it was utilitarianism kind of at the beginning, and then Kantian ethics kind of in the middle, and now it's virtue ethics, I think, sort of at the end. And I think Sandel, although I haven't really read much of his work, I think he falls more in the virtue ethicist position, and the reason he ends on that is because that's what he wants to sell you on. I mean, he doesn't really try. The last day's lecture actually is sort of him trying to defend it a little bit. One of the things I've noticed about the Harvard classes, which I was really impressed by, is they tend to, just like the Sandel ones, they end with like a crescendo, like it comes like that last lecture where he's like building up to this final point, and they all stand and clap. Like that actually was every class. Like every professor has like a big ending. And I guess that's just like the habit there to have like kind of to like write like a movie plot where you have a nice dramatic speech for the last 10 minutes to like sum everything up. But let's start with talking about affirmative action, and the thought that, well, in general, universities will admit, or prefer minorities at certain percentages in the past. I mean, often it's thought of as helping minorities, helping the university and society at large by including these minorities, or correcting by helping the university by including, like, having you have diverse student body who can all experience one another. And I mean, if you think that traveling abroad is an enlightening experience that teaches you about other cultures, having those people in the classroom is also the same sort of thing. You can see the educational value of having a diverse student body. That's sort of one of the justifications for it. There's also just righting past wrongs where minorities were excluded from universities. There's also things that make people, I mean, one worry is that you're denying people admission on the basis of this social good that has nothing to do with that individual person's merit. So white students might get denied, but also other minority groups get denied. In the past, Jewish students were denied from Harvard because they didn't want to seem too Jewish at Harvard. There were so many Jewish students getting accepted. Harvard was being afraid of becoming known as a Jewish university. And in modern day times, Asian students tend to be rejected. I mean, not just white students, but often Asian students are scoring particularly well on tests and doing well on paper, but then being rejected because students of different minority groups are being preferred over them. And I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court has been getting more and more sympathetic to the view that the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court makes the claim, like, I get it, affirmative action is a corrective. I can understand that, but at some point this needs to end, and we need to stop judging people on their minority status. And like, so, I mean, I think we're pretty close to the Supreme Court saying, stop all this. I don't know if that's the right decision, because I think there's a lot of interesting things like in this video that they talk about. I do think that just like traveling across the world is an educational experience, having a diverse student body is it contributes to your education. I'm going to shut up now. Let's talk about affirmative action.
I was actually kind of swayed a little bit by the Texas case personally, and how they were saying that those were the values of the University of Texas Law School. And part of that was that they wanted to accurately reflect the state of Texas, being that they were part of the University of Texas system. So I actually thought that was kind of a convincing argument, personally, like in terms that it was aligning with the school's values. Now, whether the school can set those values if they're right, I don't know, but it didn't seem particularly bad.
I thought that for me, the thing that is by far the most convincing thing is like the social purpose, because I think that having like people go to school allows them to have a lot more self-determination. And so like in the past, right, when Black people were not allowed to go to like a lot of schools and universities and so on, they had so much less ability to, do self-determination. Just in general, the whole community was very oppressed by the system that wasn't letting them, go to school and then like become lawyers, become judges. And so I think that we need to have like education for everyone. Um, but then also, I'm a little sympathetic to the view as well that provides for a better educational experience. Originally, when I was in high school, I had really no sympathy for this view. And then, and my high school is fairly diverse. It wasn't like perfect, but it was pretty diverse. And then I left high school and I went to work in an internship, and it was so incredibly white. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just blew my mind. It was really shocking. And that totally changed my outlook. And now I really feel like diversity is quite important to have.
I mean, I think that in Harvard, they also, I mean, there's a reason even conservative senators have Princeton, Harvard, et cetera, on their resume, because they want to educate all the leaders. Like those Ivy Leagues want to educate all the senators that run the country. And so they do, accept, I think this sort of thinking actually also promotes conservatives being like the sort of views that are often underrepresented in universities at these. I mean, like when they talked about same-sex marriage in that last lecture. In one sense, you might be like, on one level, I was kind of surprised to have like people defend. Like he was like, "Who's going to defend it?" I'm like, "Well, it's a big crowd. He's going to be able to find somebody." But also, I always find that like a kind of an undefensible position to argue against same-sex marriage. But on the other hand, they specifically choose a student body to make sure they include, Catholics, conservatives, football stars from Iowa who come from a deeply religious family. And so they have those viewpoints to be represented in the classroom. And it seems like that's an important component to, I mean, among other things, a philosophy class. Like you get to hear those positions and those arguments, I think, are important to hear and learn from, even if you think they're wrong.
Yeah, that is something I'm always impressed by, is their class seems so diverse in so many ways. Like even for the affirmative action, I think it seemed about half the students agreed and disagreed with it, which I'm not sure if you would find that in our classroom in particularly. But yeah, I really think it is important to have intellectual diversity in different backgrounds. And I think sometimes people focus too much on affirmative action in terms of race. Like, I really wish more schools would consider it the way Harvard does, in terms of we want people from much of a variety of backgrounds as we possibly can.
There is what was I going to say? I mean, there is also the element of one of the arguments for affirmative action was we want, like, for example, we want Latino leaders who are arguing for the rights of immigrants. And, like we need to educate leaders in every community, not just the white community, or not just the Asian community. Like we do need to make sure that people who are in these ethnic groups, coming from these backgrounds, belonging to these, neglected populace, have their best leaders, their lawyers, their politicians that educated
Yes,
accept.
obviously they all deserve to go to Harvard as well, if
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, you're picking them over maybe a more like somebody who scores better on tests. Like a white student or an Asian student might be not accepted, so you can accept a Somali immigrant to the United States, who's living in Michigan, because I mean, one is they provide a diverse student body who you can learn from, but also maybe they are a really great student and they are going to excel when they get to Harvard, but they aren't doing as well because they didn't have as many good opportunities. You're also being able to educate somebody to help provide leadership and a doctor, a lawyer, a political leader of that community, which you wouldn't be doing if you accepted another member of the same community you've been drawing upon all of your acceptances. If you're just judging things on merit, if you're just judging things on the basis of test scores or GPAs or things like, I mean, I'm torn, right? I think, yeah, no, I don't know.
I think that another thing to consider when you said like half the class supported gay marriage, and maybe it wasn't. No, I don't think it was.
Oh no, that
Affirmative
gay
action.
I bet you gay marriage would have been he didn't ask he didn't pull
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah,
bet
he
you
didn't pull
that would have been. I was
No, we're still in affirmative action.
surprised that anybody did, but I mean, there's yeah.
Well, my point was this.
But that anybody was opposed to it. Sorry, not that
Did
they
it in
not anybody supported.
2009. And if you look at the thing of 2009, at least for the population as a whole, it's about 50-50. For young people, that's probably quite different. However,
Oh yeah, and for college educated, particularly at a Ivy League, it's going to be pretty low to be opposed to gay marriage. And the young population of college educated people going to a top tier school who presumably, that's going to be a.
Yeah, just think about it personally. Like, David, how many people your age do you know who are like actually against, like, it's not just something their parents said, you know?
One thing that I thought was very interesting about that is nobody actually brought up that it seems rather arbitrary to have marriage be between a man and a woman. Like, there was that one guy, one of the Catholics, who brought up, he said marriage has two theological purposes, and the first one was for procreation, and the second one was to like be a bond between a man and a woman. And the first one was neither sufficient nor necessary, because there's infertile couples, and
I think
marry.
Did he say that infertile couples shouldn't be able to get? I need to rewind. They pressed him on that, and then he gave an answer, and I didn't quite understand it, but I also didn't rewind. I wonder if he would say that marriage
wasn't
infertile couples shouldn't be. I mean,
because he also does say companionship is valuable. But David, I think what he means by conception is, what he's trying to say is there needs to be a system and a sort of, what would you say, the
right,
the whatever, the institution of marriage should exist to provide a secure thing to raise children within. That would be more of, it's not really the act of creating children, it'd be more the act of raising children, in my understanding.
Well, I mean, you can adopt, right, a kid, but I think he actually kind of abandoned the point when he was pressed on fidelity. He said, well, that's why I gave two reasons. And I think the second reason was more of just a commitment, like between a man and a woman. But then still, like, my point is just, why does it have to be between a man and a woman? If you are throwing out procreation, then it seems rather arbitrary.
I think religious people are in a tough bind. So let's say we reject divine command theory and morality isn't just a matter of God's commands. You can still say that God knows all and he's a perfectly moral being, and so like if God tells you some weird, he's like, all right, he tells you all the right moral things, it totally matches up with the moral theory, you're like, yeah, and you have perfect evidence that God, he has come down and he has painted the word God exists in the sky and fire, everyone's seen it, you have absolute evidence that God exists. And then he comes out and there's just like one weird thing. He says, but the most important thing is that you don't use blue chalk. No blue chalk. I know it sounds weird. No murder, no lying, no cheating.
Don't do it.
No blue chalk. And you're like, that seems really arbitrary and weird. But okay. So I think the better argument for, I don't know. I just can't buy any of the arguments against it. I think the best argument would be, it seems really dumb, but apparently, right?
Yeah.
Like we're just,
you would say something like, you would say something like, we're flawed, and this
we don't know.
This omnipotent being that I believe exists says so. Therefore, we should listen to them.
I don't hear that.
And that's what we should base our legal system on.
Make that argument. I really wish somebody did, because
just for the fun of it.
It's just like I have like there was
argument to make. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we might as well have some fun.
I thought it was kind of interesting in the last lecture there how all of a sudden everything seemed very relative. It was like about how like, in the past, like Aristotle would say slavery was, virtue ethics justify slavery. And then it was like Southerners in the 60s said they, we're just like supporting like our past of how it was. And then now it's like gay marriage, like people are using like the same arguments and so on, right? And I feel like he kind of said, well, people have moral and religious values, and maybe like our government needs to be neutral, whatever. I felt like it was all kind of defeatist in the idea that we could actually reach some kind of ethical ground, right? It was like, well, some people like gay marriage and some people don't. But I mean, what if like one of the sides is actually like right ethically, right? What if it's because I feel like your religion doesn't really change like what an objective morality would be, and your personal values shouldn't change what an objective morality should be.
I think part of the issue is that when we talk about virtue ethics, the biggest concern is collapsing into like the reason the worry of relativism showed up here is because we're kind of taking this virtue ethical position, or that's sort of the part of these lectures that deals with that. And the biggest, or not the biggest risk, but that's relativism, I think, rears its head the most when we're talking about virtue ethics. And I think what he wants to say is something like he's talking about political. Actually, here's a general point about these lectures. One of the things the Kantians want to do, the sort of Kantian outlook with like Nozick and Rawls, I think, is government has no role in determining what you do with your life. We're just here to like protect your freedom to live the life, as you see fit, what you think is your proper way of like what you think is good for you. Like this is just so a bunch of free wills. I mean, for Nozick, it's about respecting, the history of the property trades and the choices of who you decide to trade with. For Rawls, it's a bunch of free wills deciding how to live together. But ultimately, it's sort of directed at like, you get your own sphere to decide how you want to live your life. And we're not going to tell you we're not going to make any assumptions on what the good life is. These are just these side constraints to keep you guys in your separate spheres, and that way you're not, treading over somebody else's decisions about how to live their own life, and you're kept within your own, not within your own bound, but within the bounds of not, what do I want to say here? Stepping on anyone else's foot, I guess. But with the virtue ethicist seems to be like, no, I'm going to make really strong claims about the purpose of marriage, the purpose of human life, like what it means to be a good human. And I'm going to like do state policies that, and I think what one of the arguments Sandel is making is he thinks you just can't avoid having to take stances on these issues, that the Kantian is wrong, that he can set up society and government in a way that doesn't have to take stances on these issues. And the right way to argue about it. So a lot of people were arguing, let's just not have governments recognize marriages at all. Just get out of the business of making these decisions in the first place. I think what Sandel is sort of arguing is like, no, I mean, there's a limit to how like we actually are going to have to make, as a society, take stances on these issues. And he's not going to try avoiding taking the stances. He's just going to argue for the ones he thinks is correct, right? Marriage is about love and commitment, not about procreation. Here are the reasons why. And so here's how the government, as opposed to I think the Kantian argument is like, let's just get out. Why are we even recognizing marriages in the first place, right? So the Kantian argument, both for Rawls and I think Nozick, even though they had very different positions, is government should be more hands-off on making assumptions about what the right way to live is and leave free wills to like decide for themselves. The virtue ethicist is like, you can't avoid it in the defeatist sort of way that we have to. And I think what Sandel wants to do is just argue for what he thinks is the correct way. And then he worries that it's going to collapse into some sort of relativism. Like once you start taking these stances, and he's not clear in this. I don't know if he's a relativist. I kind of doubt it. But at least that's obviously a worry that the virtue ethicist has.
I mean, I think for more big ticket issues like slavery and marriage, you really have to decide because, for example, look at the US. Like you can't have half the nation believing that a human being can be your property and you can own them, and the other half thinking the opposite, because eventually it just leads to a civil war. Because you can't run a society like either human value is intrinsic and you can't own it, or it's not. And you can't live in a society that's separated in that. And I think you could make the same argument for gay marriage or for a couple of other things. Like things to that extent, you really can't have we'll agree to disagree. because eventually it'll destroy the society.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that, with a lot of issues, we have to simply, come to the conclusion and then enforce it. And so that's what we had to do. That's what has to be done with like slavery, with gay marriage, with like abortion. It's that one isn't resolved yet, but we can't just like say we're going to agree to disagree. If you think it's murder, then it's like having murder be legal. And if you think the opposite way, then it's like a devastating issue to not have it be legal. So we need to eventually just reach like, we can't avoid talking about whether or not it's ethical and just say, well, maybe it's okay, maybe it's not, let people do whatever. You just can't keep saying that forever.
Some of this stuff, like, well, what's the purpose? So I'm just gonna Scalia, who I think has wrong opinions about a lot of stuff, but he's got this Kantian, I think, Nozickian libertarian view. Is like, why is the government debating the purpose of golf to decide this?
That was really funny.
And I think, if you had a conception, if you took the libertarian form of government, where you just have a police force, a military, and a court system to enforce property rights and to make sure you guys don't murder each other, and to defend the borders from invaders, like, the government doesn't have to make decisions on any. This is the sort of like, leave people alone to live their lives. And I think there is a way in which a lot of these debates, I think Scalia had to be just sitting there like, why is this a court? Like, why? I'm a member, I work for the government. This is an argument between like how to set up the rules of a game and what the purpose of the game is.
Could you imagine? Like, you devote your entire life, you go to law school, you study, you practice for what, like 30 years or something ridiculous, and like you get appointed, and it's like, should this guy use a cart in golf or not?
I think it is this matter of fairness that there's a game this guy loves and he's good at. And I don't know. I don't know if the thing.
Obviously we shouldn't, exclude people with disabilities, but it does seem funny. My favorite point for that argument was I believe the professor was saying those in golf are touchy about whether or not golf is really a sport or not. So this is really a ruse to defend how athletic the nature of golf is.
They don't really care. They have a vested interest
in
being ruled a certain way. I think that one way where I really do agree with the libertarians is Sandel said it in a much earlier lecture. He said no moralizing legislation. What I would like to say is no like laws that enforce norms that are purely cultural. And so for me, that is like gay marriage.
I think you're right. I totally agree with that. Also I'm a Kantian, so of course I'm gonna agree with that.
Yeah, you're like, culture, what is that?
So my point is that I think that maybe that's part of where the government gets to decide. We have to like have a decision on, is abortion okay or not? But then there's other issues where we can just leave it to people to figure out what's right for them. I think when it comes to cultural norms, that's maybe where the line is drawn. Like, if it turns out that incest is okay from a pure like ethical objective standpoint, but it's still wrong like culturally, normatively, then the government shouldn't be able to pass a law restricting that.
It's funny because Scalia has such a fucked up view of morality. He's one of the, like, as a Kantian, I have a lot of sympathies for his libertarian views and his view, but he takes morality to be, I've got a gut feeling that homosexuality is wrong. Isn't that how I learned that murder is wrong? I just go by my gut feelings. So like, morality is just a matter of my gut feelings. So murder's wrong, homosexuality is wrong. That's just how it goes. It's like, no, that's not. I'm just thinking about just Scalia in particular. All the Supreme Court justices are very, very smart. I respect them all. They give very good views. But man, I really hate Scalia's view of morality as being just this, like, whatever he happens to have his gut feeling tell him, and his conscience tells him that two women or two men having sex is just. I think it's just a confusion of him feeling disgust at that, which is probably culturally.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, disgust doesn't make something moral.
Yeah, incest. our disgust towards incest is evolved into us. I don't think our disgust, or the people who feel disgust towards homosexuality, is that it's. I don't see any evolutionary reason why that would be inbuilt. It seems like that's probably a cultural.
No, it does seem
You think it's
purely.
I
evolutionary
think it's
built
like a
in?
religious thing.
I think it's,
really.
yeah, the religious cultural aversion to it, I think is cultural. If anything, like, I think you mentioned what was it, the gay uncle argument?
So yeah, the gay uncle
Like,
just it was
yeah,
that maybe evolution produced or allows for a certain percentage of homosexual people because it allows a non-procreating family member that contributes to the raising of kids as opposed to having to go trying to raise their own.
yeah, like evolutionarily, I think it'd be perfectly reasonable.
I mean, that might be one.
Yeah, there are plenty of other
Why are there
species.
why do women suddenly lose the ability to procreate at a certain age? Like,
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know, right? But
why do like, for example, in times of strife there will be more girls born than boys?
in,
Like, why is that? Or like, if the mother's under like high stress, the body's more likely to abort, not abort, to miscarry a male uterus as opposed to a female uterus. Like, that happened during 9/11 actually, and they documented it, that there was an increased amount of miscarriages due to increased stress, and the majority of those were male.
do we think? All right, so let's talk about interesting point, Sophia. I just want to make sure we move on. We're moving at a quick pace, and we've got so much to cover. What about the stuff about kind of obligations to your family members or members of your own society? So this is when he was talking about Alistair McIntyre and his views on a narrative self-conception. You can see how. We talked earlier about personal identity and debating the issues of what makes you who you are, and personal identity had implications on the issue of abortion. And here it is showing up again with issues of political obligations. But so what do we think about like debates of patriotism? So there was a couple examples actually. One was you see a friend in your dorm cheating on an exam. Are you obligated to turn them in? One of the students said he wouldn't do that. Whitey and Billy Bulger. So Whitey was was he a bank robber or a serial killer? I forget. But his brother refused to testify against him and turn him in. And then lastly, then there was a World War II bomber. He was a French person who had escaped France. Nazis took it over, and then he became a pilot for the Allies and was given orders to bomb his own village back in France, and he refused because that was his village, even though he thought that they should bomb it for the purposes of liberating France. But he thought that it was just he couldn't do it. And lastly was General Lee of the Confederacy, who was, I guess, personally against slavery and was offered the position of being a general in the Union Army or leading the Union Army, and he turned that down and led the Confederate army out of a sense of loyalty to his country,
his state of Virginia.
State of Virginia. Which, by the way, was much more like, now we talk about U.S. patriotism, but back in the day, your patriotism was more attached to your particular state.
Yeah, like you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, you wouldn't say I'm an American. You'd say I'm a Virginian. Yeah,
that was. Say I'm. Yeah, exactly.
In the way the Texans still are, with their like flags everywhere.
Exactly. What is it, like every 5 years they try another to get annexed again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone at the McDonald's takes off and they all go to the annexation rally.
I mean, if you look at my Twitter bio, it says Texan on it. I mean, every Texan, even if you're me, you're still like, yeah, it's an important part of. I have it programmed into me to be very proud of this arbitrary random fact.
I think that the question about like, is McIntyre right about it's such a hard question, honestly. Like, is it okay to like favor people who are, like in the same group as you? I think that I think maybe there's like a level of reciprocity when you're talking about like helping somebody in your family, right? Like maybe you owe it to your parents to help them when they're older. I think maybe as the group gets larger, it starts to become more faded away. But like, I feel like there's a certain point where it's just like really caring about someone more than someone else for morally irrelevant reasons. Like when we get to the point where we're like, well, maybe one American life is the same as like two Chinese lives because I'm a
Yeah.
patriot.
Right.
That
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doesn't seem right to me at all. I just can't accept that that's true.
I mean, companies would literally, in terms of hiring, it was like one American is worth 10 Chinese or like 8 Indians because of what the wage they could give them. So, I mean, that would just be another example of how we don't really like to put value on human worth, but then companies go ahead and do it.
Well, I think that's more of just like minimum wage laws rather than the actual people themselves.
Can we talk about the specific case of the roommate who sees so you're in college, you see your roommate cheating on his exams. I think so. Here's how. I mean, I think in that case, like you as a human being, it just seems like you need to like people make mistakes, and when you're living with somebody else, like there's a certain level of intimacy where you're constantly seeing each other, and it feels like you should give each other, like you make an agreement, like, listen, I'm going to fuck up. You're going to fuck up. We're not perfect people. Like, let's just like, whatever happens in this house happens between us, and don't like, like that seems like, I don't think I buy bonds of loyalty, bonds of patriotism, but I do buy this idea that when you agree to put yourself in a situation where you're letting the other person into your private life, and like who like and roommates constantly see each other, that there's a level of stress. You don't want to be on guard as if you're in public when you're at home. Or with your friends or with your wife. You should be able to. And some of these things you do are wrong. I mean, we all are bad people and we make mistakes. And I think having a space, like a private space where you can where you can let your guard down is important, just as a human, just like psychologically important. And even in this class, there is the group me, which I don't look at, right? I hope you guys aren't cheating on that group me, but I also don't want to. First off, if I were watching it, you guys would just create, I mean, not you, but or whoever, maybe you guys, I don't know your personal, but I mean, like students would just create a different group me and it would, but giving people personal space, giving them private space and hoping that they do the right thing and knowing that occasionally they're going to screw up, but not forcing people to feel like every moment of their life is public. Despite, I mean, it also seems kind of elitist, like rich people can buy single person apartments, whereas poor people have to live in like if you are a rich college student and you're cheating, you can just buy a one person apartment, and if you're poor, you're living in a community, and like so now you don't have that sense of pride. You lose the privacy that you could have if you were rich. All I'm saying here is not to support cheating. I think that's wrong. I mean, I think you're cheating yourself. Me personally, when I was in high school, I cheated a lot. I stopped in college. It just sort of, I got to college and I loved learning, and I was in a place where people loved learning and they were teaching. Like it was a great community. And so all of a sudden I didn't make a decision to stop. It just stopped because I was somewhere serious about learning. But in high school, I cheated a lot. And wait, where is this story going? I lost the thread there. But yeah, no, in high school, I cheated a lot. But yeah, nope. All right. Well, I can't edit this. So that's.
So are you more sympathetic to cheaters because of that, or?
I'm not sympathetic to. Oh, what I want to say is I often cheated, particularly in class. So in classes, and I feel like I cheated myself, right? Like I was really bad at math. I mean, I'm teaching at college now. Academia is my job. I've gotten good at math since then. I barely learned any French and I lost it all. I'm just saying that like all of the education I deprived myself of when I was younger by cheating, I'm really pissed off about. Like the sort of old person who's like, you're only cheating yourself. I feel like I'm living that now because I'm just super pissed at my younger self for like, why didn't you just do the work, man? We could like know how to do this if we didn't like, I wouldn't have to relearn this. I don't have to go relearn French if I want to go visit Paris. If you would just like, instead of spending that whole semester in class trying to get around the rules, if you just went along with it and realized you were benefiting yourself. So anyway, I'm making an argument against cheating as looking back on my past of doing it in high school and the way in which I deprived myself of a lot of ability and skill and made things harder on myself by not learning the stuff when I should have learned it in the first place. In any case, even if I think that cheating is wrong, you're hurting yourself. I think it's also a lie and wrong for those reasons and a betrayal of trust, etc. I also think that people deserve to have space to make their own mistakes and privacy and not have to always be on guard. And so I'm sympathetic to not the idea of these bonds of loyalty, I guess, but more that we should be able to live with others and not have to be on guard all the time and be given room to make mistakes. What do you think?
I think we should have like some level of trust with those that at least we have to live with. Because otherwise, like you said, we just don't have any privacy, and privacy's like psychologically is just very important. And like depriving that is very harmful.
Yeah, I don't know about the morality of this. I don't know what the right thing, like ethical thing to do is, but I do know that like if you're in this situation, you want to like have a good relationship with your roommate.
Oh yeah, that's right. True. That's true too.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you're just really, really going to screw up your relationship. Like,
yeah,
even no matter what, like the right thing to do is, it seems like if it is wrong to not report them, it's a small wrong. And maybe like the happiness that you get from a good relationship outweighs that. I don't know.
Because you could imagine. So the small wrong thing, I think actually does play a role. Like if he's murdering and raping people, if your roommate's buying Rohypnol, I think you need to turn that shit in, right? Like if your roommate's a serial killer, you should turn that in. If they have like a system, like if they are cheating their way completely through college, maybe that's some. But if it's,
like maybe if it's like a singular assignment, like their friends give them the answer to, that's different from cheating on all their exams and their finals.
Absolutely.
Obviously, both are wrong, but there's a difference.
I mean, if I catch you as your professor, then I don't have any. I mean, like there's a way in which the people you live with, I feel, you make an agreement. Like we're living together, we're going to be in very intimate contact with each other, and we need to be able to not judge one another as much as strangers maybe should judge. I need this. When I'm home, I need to feel like I'm not constantly being. I don't know. Maybe I'm making excuses.
Yeah, watched.
Yeah, it feels similar to like the police having a camera in your house and or authority, that just the idea of your neighbors and friends and roommates reporting on you, right? Like that. I think that just generates this feeling of unease and inability to feel comfortable that there's something worthwhile, that there's something important about preserving that comfort of privacy, which is more important than catching the occasional cheater.
Yeah. What do you think about never mind. In the interest of time,
we should definitely move on.
I feel really bad because yesterday we did it way too long.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next?
Yeah, we're only at 44 minutes, guys.
All right, so let's do one last thing and then let's end it. What do we want? What do you want to talk about? You know what? I'm going to let you guys bring up topics of your own, and then we'll end it. Sophia, do you have anything?
I mean, my favorite comment, because this will be short, was when the guy was talking about the difference between if you have a hardy voice and you have one eye, then maybe you're more equipped to be a pirate. And the professor said, let's be careful, the distinctions may not be as clear as you seem to think.
I definitely laughed out loud, both at his comment and Sandel's response.
Yeah, I think the whole class started laughing.
Yeah. I really liked the whole like Winnie the Pooh thing. It was like
oh, that was great.
It's like theological reasoning was like when he's like, I hear a buzzing noise, and the only reason someone would make a buzzing noise is being a bee, and the only reason someone would being a bee is because to make honey, and the only reason somebody would make honey is so I can eat it.
Right. And I mean, the before basically before well, I mean, before the Renaissance, like the old school way of even doing science, you involve teleological reasoning, and like the reason this pen falls to the ground is that the pen is made of matter, and matter is seeking its proper place. Its goal, its telos, is to be in the center of the universe, and that's why things all matter tries. So like
i.e. why the Earth is the center of the universe and the sun revolves around us.
Is it's trying. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that I really love just funny things that happen. I really love the rejection letter and the acceptance letter. The
That was so funny.
That was very funny.
Not because of any of your particular skills, but this is the characteristics that society finds it most opportune to exploit at this point in time. Please try again next year.
And then the acceptance letter was, we just need to use you. Don't think that this is to your own merit. This is just this is what society values right now. And if you allow us to exploit you, you are entitled to the benefits which attached to being used in this way.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. I wish that was in our acceptance letters. That would be so funny.
Yeah, I like how like he always he kind of like has this way where he'll introduce some like idea and he'll talk about the idea for a while, and then he'll take like something that's maybe kind of pop culture-y or something like that, and he'll attach it to sort of like how like with the fertility clinics he had like the ads, and then I saw like some other video where he was talking about what was it, like what can money buy, and he brought up like that there was some company where you can pay them like $100, and they'll write an apology letter and they'll give an apology to someone. And it was like maybe it
you just don't want to do it.
And then there was like a company that you could pay them $150 and say, I want a funny wedding speech, and this is a bunch of information about the person, and they'll give you a well-written, beautifully crafted wedding speech. Right. And he's like, maybe it's devalued if the audience knows that the speech was written for you.
Right. Yeah, no, he's got a book called What
You wouldn't tell them. Maybe afterwards it would be funnier. And by the way, I didn't write the speech. I paid a company $100 to do it. I mean, to be fair, how many people agonize over those wedding speeches and they aren't even good? So you might as well export the service.
For 3 days, but of course, maybe I'm different.
What did you say?
Sorry, never mind.
You know, maybe better let the experts craft a funny speech.
And it seems a little disingenuous, but like, I mean,
if anyone has a better time at the wedding,
like, do you only care about the consequences, right? Like, is it, well, if I don't tell anyone about it, then everyone will like have a better experience than if I wrote it myself.
Oh man, now we're getting back to the experience machine, right? Does it matter that I really did this and like wrote this like heartfelt speech for my brother or whoever, or does it matter only that they think I did?
Yeah.
Right?
You know, there was kind of an interesting case that I think is I did the fine thing here, but I guess it seems a little similar to the wedding case, so maybe that scares me just a tiny bit. But it was somebody asked for volunteers to read something, and so I said, yeah, sure, you know, I like interacting with people, I'll read something. And the speech was really hard to read. It was like this long paragraph. It was about, the project was essentially about the like changing the grades to pass fail if you want to, having the pass fail option, and the speech was about like somebody whose brother committed suicide, and like his brother had schizophrenia, and he was like doing really badly on all of his classes and so on, because he was living in a room with his the schizophrenic brother who kept like screaming at him that his soul was leaving his body, whatever.
Yeah.
And so the point was, I was reading this as, you know, as emotionally as I could for this project, which was, you know, essentially in support of the pass fail option. I don't actually know if I support the pass fail option, right? And yet I tried as, you know, as well as I could, to give this story the emotional weight that I felt it deserves, right? But maybe there's something a tiny bit disingenuous about the fact that I don't actually know if I support that policy.
Yeah, and that's a nice example, actually. I like that a lot. I don't know what to say. I mean, it definitely, yeah. I don't know what I think about this debate, but that seems like a good example. Is there anything else, David, you had? Because we're all kind of riffing off of what Sophia said. So before we leave, did you have something else?
Nope, not really. No.
Okay.
Have a nice rest of everyone's life for the people who
Yes.
watch. The
Yeah.
people watching this video.
I hope these discussions have been valuable. I don't know how many students. I mean, I can check. I think it's like 20 of our 100, so it's not a lot.
Well, I mean, that's something.
Yeah, for the ones who are watching it, I mean, I hope it's giving them the classroom experience.
Yeah, for those of you watching, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, you can.
It feeds our narcissism. Although, as the professor, I get my narcissism fed all the time. But for the two of you, this is a unique experience to.
Yeah. Email me if you have any questions.
David and Sophia, I want to thank you both for doing these videos with me. It's been a real joy. I know we've had both a lot of fun, and I know it puts you on the spot and makes you watch these lectures ahead of time.
That it does.
Yeah, I know but you've been great, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to stop the video now, and then we'll talk a little bit more, and I'll let you guys go.